Good evening and welcome to the Adath Israel Congregation's feature presentation. My name is Bonnie Haas, and I've been a member here for 42 years. We recognize that these are very difficult times that our congregation is experiencing, and we hope that you are all well and safe, and we're very pleased that we can say that we have over 465 people here this evening sharing the evening with us. Just to say that if you are having any questions for our guests, will you please submit them to the conversation chat box on your screen? Thank you. For this evening's program, we are very excited to feature Barry Avrich, who is being interviewed by Richard Krause. Now, many of you will recognize Richard Krause because he is on CTV, where he has a talk show program called Pop Life. And also he's on CFRB 1010 Radio, where he talks about movies and the upcoming Oscars and so forth. Barry Avrich is our featured guest, and he is a veteran producer, director, and the founder of Melba Entertainment Group. Melba has produced over 50 internationally acclaimed documentaries and productions, including The Last Mogul, Prosecuting Evil, and also 21 award-winning stage-to-screen adaptations of Broadway and Shakespeare shows, including The Tempest, featuring our own late Christopher Plummer, and King Lear with Colm Feore. Barry has recently produced and completed new documentaries, including David Foster, which I hear is fantastic. It's called Off the Record. And our own Howie Mandel, Enough About Me. And also Barry is in pre-production on 4 new films. Barry has also produced the Scotia Giller Prize television show for you bookies that are out there. He is the founder and partner of BTA Advertising, which led marketing campaigns for clients including American Express, Starbucks, and thousands of films. So let's put our hands together and welcome Richard Krause and Barry Avrich. Thank you.
Barry, how are you?
Hi, Richard. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome to the 465 people who have joined us tonight.
And Richard, who knew that you are an approved caterer at the Adath Israel Synagogue?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here. I'll start by asking you, Barry, the question that everyone's asking everyone these days. How are you making out during the pandemic?
Well, here we are. I'd much rather see the audience and get a sense of them than this, but we're all finding a way to pivot. It's not easy. We have found ways to adapt, but even my own wife, who always gets the question of what's it like being married to him, and her answer for over 21 years has been, well, he travels a lot. That's now a big problem.
Yeah, you're home more often, but you're working on 4 films, so you're still making that happen during the pandemic. Are you finding ways that are enjoyable to work in this way, or is it something that you have to make do for now, and that as soon as this is over, it'll be face-to-face with all your cast and crew once again?
You have to make do. It's painful. I don't enjoy it at all. I mean, when I was finishing 2 films when the pandemic hit, one of them being, the Howie Mandel But Enough About Me film. I mean, and how serendipitous to find yourself in the middle of a pandemic when you're making a biography about the world's most famous germaphobe. So thankfully, he was more comfortable with this world and pivoting than I was. And then the other film we were just getting ready to deliver to Netflix was a film called Made You Look, about the largest art fraud in U.S. history. And that's a film that had tons of art. And so normally, without being technical, you would go in to a studio and you would color correct every frame. You've got beautiful Jackson Pollocks and Mark Rothko's, some of them real, some of them not, and gingerly color every frame or hear a sound mix. And I have to sort of take their word for it by these ridiculous, Zoom links. And I would reserve judgment to say, okay, when there's no lockdown, I need to go back in and fix everything, which is what I did. So it's not been easy. And but right now, in the middle of a bunch of films, and we just for the Scotiabank Giller Prize last fall, we flew out to Vancouver to film Diana Krall, and a beautiful performance. And do I like being in a hazmat suit 50 feet away trying to direct her, and she'd finish a take and she'd go, Barry, what do you think? And I'd go, and she'd go, what? It's completely unpleasant, but like everything else, this too shall pass. What can you do?
It has been a difficult year for many people. We've lost a lot of people, and I just wanted to ask you about one of them. Christopher Plummer was a friend of yours. You had worked with him many times. What can you tell us about Christopher Plummer?
What an elegant man, Canadian royalty when it came to acting. Never forgot that he was Canadian. I wrote about it recently in the National Post, where I don't want to regurgitate these stories, but I had met him first on screen, my father introducing me to him on screen, and then came full circle to moving to Toronto, finding him at the Sutton Place, and not necessarily the best time of his career or mine. I was just starting out school in a very cold city. I didn't know anybody, being a Montreal Jew, and so I found myself at the bar at the Sutton Place drinking one night after classes, and met Plummer. The bartender introduced us. We drank heavily that night, talked about Montreal and the differences between Montreal and Toronto. And then as I was leaving, stumbling out of the hotel, I think after hearing the great Joe Seeley play piano all night, the doorman said to me, "Oh, I see you've met Liquid Plummer," which I thought was very, very cruel. And then again, to sort of pivot and work with him on Barrymore at Stratford, and then on Broadway. And I told the great story of when we were filming him for commercials, and we didn't know each other yet. And he would walk on the stage, and we'd have to film pieces of him, spitting out dialogue of the great John Barrymore. So we'd have him come out and do it. And he didn't like commercials. It's beneath him. And so I had asked him to do it yet again, another take, and he screamed at me through the darkness of the Music Box Theater in New York and said, "I am not a jukebox that you can put a nickel in every time you need something from me." And I thought, holy, that's frightening. And then went on to do multiple things with him, including 2 productions at Stratford and many things over the years, Lifetime Achievement Awards. And Richard, here was the sad thing. I mean, this man was 90, signed to do another 2 or 3 films. He was going to do King Lear as a feature film, which I was hoping to be a part of. And Stratford had asked me to interview him for the re-release of 2 of the films we had done together. And just literally in late November, we did that together, him in Connecticut, me in Toronto via Zoom, but the crew with him in Connecticut, and vibrant and fabulous. It was tragic. And yes, he had a long, fantastic life and won the Oscar, thrilled, but still had so much to do. So sad to see him go.
It was sad to see him go. I spoke about it a great deal around his passing, and it's very rare that you get to call someone a national treasure and actually mean it in every sense of the word.
Exactly, and Richard, I've always been outspoken about this. I don't think that Canadians are really great about honoring their own. They get, he's getting too much press. She's, this, she's that, and everybody runs to the U.S. Yes, there's a bigger market, but we've not really built a star system here so that people know, automatically. It's getting better with better Canadian film and television, and certainly the book world, having been involved with the Gillers for years. We have an incredible resources of literary talent. But for Chris Plummer to just constantly remind people that it's Canada and this is where he began, he never forgot it.
And if you want to see an underrated film of his that holds up, was written off for years, Silent Partner is a great thriller that showcases Toronto in the 1970s like no other film.
We're going to remake that. Joel Michaels, the original producer, and I are now talking about a remake of Silent Partner. And of course, I said this in the Post, no scoop here, but I said that my fantasy, and I said this to Plummer, that we were going to do it and that he would have a cameo, because that's really, I think the second film I snuck in as a 14-year-old at the one of the Cineplex theaters or the Odeon, I can't remember the name of the theater in Montreal, to see it, and was frightened to hell because he played this sadistic bank robber who dresses up as Santa Claus. But it's a brilliant film that Oscar Peterson did the score for.
Yeah, and Elliot Gould and Susanna York. It's a great film, and it was written off for years, and I'm glad maybe now people will have a chance to rediscover. So let's talk about you. Is it true that, like Bob Fosse, you wake up every morning, you look in the mirror, and you say, "It's showtime"?
Well, I try not to say it too loud because I do get up generally early and don't sleep a lot on that end of it. But I think, annoying to my wife and daughter. Once I'm up, I am ready to go, no matter whether I'm at home or anywhere else. Life is for the living. I find sleep a waste of time and underrated. I do prefer to sort of get at it.
And in your book, Moguls, Monsters, and Madmen, An Uncensored Life in Show Business, you talk a great deal about getting up and getting at it, moving from Montreal to Toronto, going to school, making films, working in advertising, and not wasting any time. And I'm always amazed at your output. Since I've seen you in person last, which was just very quickly on the street a few months ago during the pandemic, you have been busy. You continue to make films one after the other. What is it? You say life is for the living, but what is it actually that drives you?
I think just being afraid to leave the party. I've lost too many great people and great friends, some of them with, at the end of their lives, literally, and others that still had so much life to live. I lost my father, who was young. And so I just feel that I'm constantly going to run out of runway. So I've tried to cram so much in to the point where, it sounds rather gloomy and maybe prophetic. Hopefully not, but that, if somebody said, this is it, then I'm kind of okay with it too, because I feel like I've done a ton and I'm happy with a lot of it, most of it. So I'm just afraid that I just won't get it all in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, in reading the book, and I in preparation for doing this interview, I went back over the book again. And I wanted to ask you, because one of the points of this interview was to talk about Moguls and to talk about monsters. You've made a trilogy of films about Moguls, some of whom turned out to be monsters. So let's talk about the life lessons that you can learn from both, from Moguls and from monsters.
Without mentioning, well, I guess we will mention names. It's on the monster side of that, we get into names specifically. I think I'm constantly amazed, even after covering people who have had it all, who've just had tremendous success, whether it is Garth Drabinsky on a Canadian front, or even, Harvey Weinstein or Lou Wasserman, all different kinds of moguls, that these are three gentlemen that had it all, could have just been happy with what they've achieved, and then yet through avarice or perversion or a sense of entitlement end up having the most Shakespearean endings in their lives. And I'm just fascinated with when is enough, and when you really ascertain within your life that the intensity of risk is going to be part of that alchemy of your makeup. I just can't believe that these people take those chances. And so, I've learned the life lessons of, certainly enjoy the moment and to take the time and enjoy the moment, and also give back in that, there isn't an email or a phone call that I'm most likely not going to return, or because somebody took a chance on me. I came to Toronto. I had no show business connections. I had no connections. I couldn't get a subway token, zero on that end of it. And yet people took the risk and took the chance. I took 2 phone calls today from various people. This one has a grandson. This one has a daughter. Can I talk to them about the industry on that end of it? And I'll always have those conversations because the world's changed and you have to do it. So I think the key message on that one, the lesson is, return every call, and you just never know. Give back on that end of it. Another great life lesson I learned from Quincy Jones. I was going through the most horrendous situation. I had a horrible business partner who did horrible things where it looked like that might be it. And as I was trying to sort of figure my way back, I happened to be in Los Angeles and went and saw Quincy Jones because he just, you know him as this music genius, this iconic producer, but he just is some kind of Zen-like Dalai Lama kind of guy.
Oh, he's like Yoda. He is wise like Yoda.
So you go and sit with him, and he doesn't talk about his life. He talks about your life. And so I told him this whole thing that I'd gone through. And he said to me, he put his hand on my knee, and he said to me, "Kid, let me tell you something. You can't have a great picture without the negative." It sounds so cliched and kooky, but then, another 3 hours later, and the first mistake I ever made when I went to see Quincy Jones on a project was that I had dinner plans, and that's a mistake because he gets up at 4 in the afternoon. We go to his house, which is like a Four Seasons hotel. The entire interior of his home is designed by Missoni, and so you walk in there and you sit with him, and there's this music playing like an orchestra throughout the house, and somebody arrives with kimchi and homemade guacamole, and they'll say, "Mr. Jones is just getting up. He'll be with you shortly." So that's 4 o'clock. And I swear to God, this happens every time. 7 o'clock, he wanders in and says hi to, his famous children who are popping by and whatnot. And then he sits with you, and you just spill and you have a great time. Now, before you know it, it's 9 o'clock, and he said, "Let's have lunch." And so then you go and have lunch with him in his kitchen. And then I swear to God, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I remember telling my wife this. He said, "Are you in the mood for sushi?" I said, "Yes, but it's 1 o'clock in the morning." And then he calls Nobu. And the next thing you know, you're on the way to Nobu that's closed, but he opens up. But that's him. But you sit with him, and that's all the superficial stuff. But you sit with him, and his great life lessons were as he broke it down. And again, it sounds like a Hallmark card, but until he breaks it down, which was live, love, laugh, and give back. And then he explains all of those, and so that's been helpful as you sort of navigate the world of the Harvey Weinsteins and the Garth Drabinsky's and the other people who have, screamed and yelled. And you do learn early on, Richard, I'm sure you've had, especially in the show business, you've got the people who scream and yell, and you realize that it's performance. You take it personally and think that they honestly think that you're a, exclamation mark idiot, then you're dead. And I learned that early on from a Canadian lunatic publicist named Gino Empri, who was the publicist for the Mirvishes. And I started there as an intern in the business. And all he did was scream at me day and night. At one time, no, this was Garth. I remember those answering machines he used to have. And I went to sleep, and I turned off the ringer, and I was sleeping, and Garth called my answering machine, my apartment. The answering machine picked up. I didn't hear it ring, and he didn't hear the message. And all I heard was him screaming at me. And I went, "My God, Garth Drabinsky's in my apartment." When he get in here, and it would be the same thing with Gino Empri. So you learn early on, Robert Lanta, whoever these screaming maniacs were, that it wasn't personal. It's their own personalities, it's performance, it's insecurities. Just do the job. And then one other life lesson that I'll let you continue, because I'm sure everybody's bored to death already, in that, John Kenneth Galbraith, the great John Kenneth Galbraith, the Canadian, the economist, the man who did the New Deal with Roosevelt, said to me, and he was like 6'7" or something. We were interviewing him for a film called Unforgettable years ago. And I said, unbelievable life. Well, we went through his whole career, and he said, "Barry, we are only concierges in life. We're here to help other people." And I never forgot that. Even when I was, working in the Eaton Center selling sheepskin coats in the summer, that somebody would walk into that store in the Eaton Center, and I would get them a dinner reservation. I would get them theater tickets at the Mirvishes. I'd make recommendations like I was a concierge in the store. I don't know why. I just wanted to help people. And those same people would come back Christmas time and spend $5,000 on coats or something. So you just remember, and it's the same thing in this world of, film and advertising. Whether an actor, a producer, a client needs something, the answer is, "I'll get it for you."
I love what you said earlier about having enough, that the main sort of personality fault in a lot of the people who have had these Shakespearean tumbles is that they don't know when enough is enough. And it reminded me of a story I just read about Joseph Heller. He's at a party. Gore Vidal is there. They're in one corner talking. Catch-22 has just come out. There are other people in the other end of the room who are extraordinarily wealthy, but they're not laughing. They are not having fun. And Gore Vidal said, you know, you will never be as rich as any of those people. And Joseph Heller said, you know why? I know when enough is enough. I have enough and I'm happy with enough. And that struck me like a lightning bolt when I read that story, because it says so much about the personality traits that make us all human and that make some of us go off the deep end and others not.
Well, Richard, it's also great story. Also, I remember in Oliver Stone's brilliant screenplay for Wall Street, Charlie Sheen's character saying to Michael Douglas, Gordon Gekko, how many yachts can you water ski behind at the same time? So it's the same thing. We all want, a good life. You want to be comfortable. You want to provide for your children. But the risk taking is, unbelievable to me. I mean, in the last scene of my movie, The Last Mogul, with Lew Wasserman, the most powerful, icon ever in Hollywood, the last mogul who ran Universal Studios. So, at the end, he sells everything. He could have retired, but he stays on. And it's just a shot of him alone in the cafeteria at Universal eating his tuna loaf with nobody around him. Can't get a restaurant reservation anymore. And so when is enough enough?
Let's talk about some of the people that you have worked with, some of whom have had more than enough, others maybe not as much, but there's a name game. So I'll throw some names at you. It seems to be fun so far, hearing the reminiscences. Let's start with Tony Bennett. You've worked with Tony Bennett. There's recent news about his Alzheimer's that has just come out, but he's still singing. He has what apparently is a beautiful record coming out with Lady Gaga very soon, but you have worked with him.
I have. I mean, the news of Tony having Alzheimer's and thankfully later in life, if you're going to have to endure that horrible thing which robs you of your mind on that end of it. And I was, saddened to read Lady Gaga's recollections of recording the album where she talked about, his voice being pristine. This was a man who never smoked or drank, unlike Frank Sinatra, who kept his vocal cords beautifully pristine on that end of it. And so, she would talk about hearing him work on a cut of a song on a track, and then she'd go back and talk to him about it. And of course, he wasn't really there. How sad. But I was lucky to work with him over the years on various concerts, a tour, and then a couple of private functions. Incredibly elegant. This was a man that showed up in that Brioni suit, smelt great, beautifully tailored, a professional, extraordinarily kind to his musicians. You read about James Brown and how vicious he was. If you missed a cue or a beat or something like that, he'd put a finger up and that meant $100 fine, $200, on that end of it. Tony was so gracious to everybody on that end of it. When we did a show in Toronto, I'll never forget this. I told the promoter, not the promoter, but the charity that was putting this on, that we were producing this big gala with Tony Bennett. I said, interestingly enough, his favorite, like Quincy, his favorite designer was Missoni, and so they made sure that his entire dressing room was stacked with Missoni towels, which somehow made their way onto Tony's plane. But he was why not? But he is the last of the breed. There's this wonderful moment which I never forgot, and I told him this, that when he recorded with Amy Winehouse a year and a half before she took her own life, and she was so nervous and panicked about. You see it in the Amy Winehouse documentary of where she's recording with Tony. She suffered from insane, crippling insecurity and stage fright, and she knocks off a song with him, and he goes and puts his hand on her cheek, on her face, and says, "You were great." You got nothing to worry about. Fabulous. And he meant it.
Yeah.
I mean, just the last of a breed. I mean, Sinatra was one thing, tough guy, don't get in his way. But Tony, class act, top to bottom.
Yeah, and the last of the great saloon singers. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. Let's throw another couple. Lauren Bacall is someone you've worked with.
Lauren, for about 10 years in Toronto, we did a series during TIFF of these celebrity tributes, which was a good way to sort of bring celebrities in that weren't necessarily a part of TIFF, but why not? And so it became almost a very selfish exercise of whoever, I wanted to meet and whoever I wanted to give an award to. And so, for years, we bring in these people. I mean, Bacall, a legend, and couldn't wait. There are a lot of them, but I couldn't wait to have her come in, and it was fun. I don't want to eat up too much time on that story, but she came in, she arrived in Toronto and had a newspaper insert from Danier Leather Factory outlet, and immediately wanted to go there and to get coats. And I said, oh, okay. Oddly enough, the store I used to work for when I started, when I moved to Toronto, the Eaton Centre was owned by them. I'll call the Wertzmans. I know them. This is the concierge in me. So I called them up and I said to Jeff Wertzman, the son of the late Irving Wertzman, I said, hi, it's Barry Avrich. I used to work for you in the Eaton Centre. I said, I've got Lauren Bacall and we're coming up. He goes, oh, no. I said, what do you mean, oh, no, it's Lauren Bacall? And he goes, she's going to want everything for free. You tell her, forget it. She can have half off and that's it. So off we went. And, and she said, I can't repeat what she said about him on this, but we went to the factory. She got all of her stuff. And then on the way back to the hotel, she was staying at the King Edward Hotel. And she said, let's go to City Hall. There's a hot dog truck a guy named Gus, who has the best hot dogs. And I said to her, Miss Bacall, I can't eat a hot dog. And she said, why not? I said, well, my grandfather was a kosher butcher. And he made me promise to never eat a hot dog off the street because of what's in it. And she said, don't be pretentious. You're going to be having a hot dog with Lauren Bacall. So we picked up a bunch of hot dogs. We went back to King Edward Hotel. And just to button this story, at the end of her stay in the hotel, the entire staff lined up at the King Edward Hotel. The entire staff lined up to say farewell to her. She wasn't coming back for various reasons. And I said, look at this, Miss Bacall. Everybody's lined up to say farewell. Is there anything you'd like to say to the staff of the King Edward Hotel? And she went, decorate. With
that voice, with that perfect voice and delivery.
God. Oh my God. Kept in touch with her. She had the most magnificent apartment in the Dakota.
Yeah.
In New York, and tough as nails, but man, a stunner.
I just was working on a little project for the restaurant Sardi's in New York.
Oh, great.
And we got married there 5 or so years ago because I love that place. And I discovered that she had been a newspaper girl outside of Sardi's when she was still Betty Persky. And she sold newspapers to all the celebrities who not long afterwards she would end up sitting next to in the dining room.
What a legend. Richard, I've had the worst luck with celebrities and hotels, and all stayed at the King Edward Hotel. She was miserable. And I didn't book her. So be it. And then, about, I'm going to say 8 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago, we did a Stratford Gala honoring Maggie Smith, Dame Maggie Smith. And the Four Seasons was closed for renovation. So the gala was going to take place at the Royal York Hotel. And the Stratford people, understandably booked her at the Dame Maggie Smith at the Royal York. She had not even unpacked her bags. And Stratford called me, producing the gala, and said, we don't know what to do. We're apoplectic. We don't know. Panicked. I said, what's the problem? They said, Dame Maggie Smith will not unpack her bags. She wants to know who's producing the event. She will not stay here. And can I give her your cell phone number? I said, okay, sure. So she calls me up and she goes, Barry? And I said, yes. Dame Maggie Smith. No, I think she said Maggie. I don't think she said Maggie. I said, yes, how can I help you? She goes, have you stayed here at the Royal York? I said, No, I know it. She goes, I'm not interested in plugging my iPhone into an oil lamp. and then she went on to describe that the hallways were so wide that she expected to run into those twins on tricycles from the movie The Shining. So I called up the Hazelton Hotel, which we were doing work for as an ad agency. David Mountaineer was the manager. And I said, David, how you doing? He goes, I can't talk to you right now. Madonna is moving in for the film festival. We have to change the toilets. And I have toilets arriving. What can I do for you? I said, look, I got a bit of a problem. I need somebody that needs to stay at the hotel. He said, not a chance. The Four Seasons is booked. It's closed. We're full. Who is it? I said, Dave Maggie Smith. He said, I'll send a car. And of course, she was supposed to stay for 3 days. She stayed for 3 weeks. And that's another story. But that I can go on and on. Robert Evans, that's another one. But Maggie was crazy.
Well, let's do one more. Let's talk briefly about Robert Evans, and then I want to just talk a little bit about how you deal with celebrities. You deal with them in a number of different ways. Sometimes as a producer, sometimes as a director. You interview celebrities for your documentaries, and they're all three different skill sets. We talked earlier about how you don't take things personally, which in that business, I guess the business we are both in, is very important because nothing will destroy your soul any faster than taking it all to heart.
My wife is rolling her eyes right now because the only place I take things personally is at home. Yeah. The minute I walk out the door, you put up with a lot, but yeah.
So a quick Robert Evans story, and then how do you do it when you're dealing with very difficult people who sometimes aren't being reasonable and probably know that they're not being reasonable?
Well, you want a Robert Evans story?
Yeah, I do. I can't let you go without getting one.
The audience doesn't know who Robert Evans is. You must see a documentary called The Kid Stays in the Picture. Mm-hmm. Robert Evans ran Paramount Studio. He was a legendary producer, The Godfather, Chinatown, Cotton Club. And
an actor before that.
Got discovered and had a very specific voice, which I'll do. But he was very tanned. He was very good looking. He came from New York as a garmento, schmutta business. His brother ran a company. Charles Evans ran a company called Evans Picone, a ladies' wear company. And Evans came to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, to make it as an actor. Almost got thrown out, and somebody said, Kid Stays in the Picture. The director didn't want him, and then he went on to run studios and be a mogul himself. And I met him because we were doing, I was interviewing him for the last Mogul, and Lou Wasserman went to his house, and you get shown into his bedroom. He only takes meetings in bed with mink throws, and he has a butler named English who brings you as cosmopolitan of the house and whatnot. And I said to him, we ended up spending the whole day together. It was supposed to be a 20-minute interview. And then I had this crazy idea of doing a Broadway show with him. And he said, my boy, this is how we should do this together. And so we worked on that. And then I brought him to Toronto to get a Lifetime Achievement Award during the film festival. Same thing, checks into the Four Seasons. People were coming and going from his suite. I can't tell half the stories, they're too filthy. But suddenly there was this Dr. Waxman, who he knew, that was showing up to give him vitamin C shots, then some other woman coming in to do spray tanning, then somebody else delivering, 152 lavender candles. It was insane. And of course, this is the only clean part I can tell of this story, is that, he did not want to leave. And the Four Seasons said, you got to get him out. We have Sandra Bullock coming in. And I called him, I said, Evans, you got to go. And he goes, my boy, I have a bit of a flu. I got to stay for another week. I said, you have to go. You have to pack up. It's like 16 trunks of crap. And I used to go and see him in LA, and he got very sick, and it was sad because I knew he was getting old. I would come to LA and he wasn't well, and he'd say, how are you, my boy? I say, great. He goes, how long are you here for? I said, till Tuesday. He goes, why did you come and see me Tuesday? But I had a lot of fun with them. The dirty stories are in the book. But in terms of dealing with people, in interviewing celebrities, tons and tons and tons of them, thankfully, And I don't know if it's the lessons from my father, who was sort of a born salesman. And he would, if somebody was calling him, he would hold the call for a minute on hold. He would go in his Rolodex and research everything about Richard Krause that there was to know. And then he'd say, okay, put the call through. Richard, how are your kids? How's this birthday? He knew everything. Yeah. And in my interviewing, when I'm doing celebrities, I don't use notes, right? No notes. So I stay up and research everything there is to know about you, which was amazing, doing Ben Ferenz and spending 8 hours for Prosecuting Evil. But because my feeling is, and this, you're that good, that if I can have a conversation with you and hold your attention and our eyes are connected, and I don't look at my watch and I don't look at my notes and you don't look at anything, then you will tell me things you'd had no intention of telling me. So that's the plan. That's the interviewing trick. And really that's Brian Linehan, right? I mean, learned at his feet, who was a late, great friend of ours in terms of his interviewing techniques. Mm-hmm. Great research, but let's stay connected on that end of it. In terms of dealing with the, again, can't use the term, but the demanding difficulty. I mean, this is the Adath Israel. If this was, some other organization that I could know, I'm being respectful. But in dealing with the, I want to be a preferred caterer one day of the Adath Israel Synagogue. If I think about the demanding celebrity, the demanding client, it's the same thing. You're pulling a thorn out of a lion's paw. You have to figure out a way to work with them and diffuse a situation. They'll get crazy, but how do you bring them back down? How do you diffuse a situation quickly and also have the ability to have the answer ready to solve it? Don't walk in and say, there's a problem. I even say this to my own staff for years. If you screwed up, then be honest about it and then tell me your best approach to solving it. So anytime I've had a situation with a celebrity where something isn't right, the camera's wrong, something's screwed up, a car didn't show up, they're making some unusual demand, you have to approach it calmly, and have a solution on that end of it and not take it personally. If they're going to be, I won't mention his name, but if you're dealing with a specific, and I was recently a specific potential subject of a documentary on that, a legendary crooner, let's leave that, and it's not Tony Bennett, do your own math, who I found to be, rude, dismissive, insecure about his own career for no reason, that I figured this journey isn't worth it for me because I don't respect them. So I'm going to take a pass and walk away from it. Now they're trying to claw their way back, and I won't go there because it's just not going to be fun. I mean, David Foster is a difficult guy. You saw it in the film. We didn't like each other when we met at all. We had to find our rhythm, but he appreciated the process of filmmaking where he said, I don't expect you to produce a song and you can't, and I don't, I know you don't expect me to produce a film. And so he completely stayed out of his way and had no, real comments or oversight in terms of the making of the film. And that's why it turned out to be entertaining.
I think that there is something to be said for the creative friction that can happen between people, but just as much can be said for people who get along, respect one another, and respectfully are able to work together. I had a musician tell me recently he was putting together a touring band that he was going to end up, when there can be music again, live music again, he'll end up spending a year or more on the road with them. And he told me, he said, I'm turning down amazing players. I'm hiring by personality. I'll get a great band, but I have to be able to hang out with these people for the next year or two. And I think that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. I think if you can get to the stage of your career, and I paid my dues through and got the scar tissue to prove Elaine Stritch, who was very difficult, but a lot of fun. When she was in Showboat, all of the cast members and everybody's involved with the production had T-shirts that said, I was in Showboat and I've got the stretch marks to prove it. Because she was tough. And of course, we brought her in. She was in my Garth Drabinsky documentary. Yeah. And she insisted on being driven from New York to Toronto. And she got into the SUV of Gregory, the Russian driver, and insisted that before she hit the highway, that the headrest be removed, because she wanted to be able to see, and that he could not stop for gas or food or a bathroom to drive straight to Toronto from New York. She did not want to stop. So you find your way. Yeah. You wait for she sleeps, and then you fill up with gas.
We have a question from an attendee here. After signing up for this, I went to see the Howie Mandel doc. Really enjoyed it. Great shout out to Jewish Toronto. I saw it on Crave, but who was the intended audience and which networks were you shooting for? Is it getting a US audience?
Yeah. So, I mean, an attendee, what does that mean exactly? It was, who's the attended audience? I mean,
well, I'm not supposed to be mentioning people's names. So it's one of the 465 people who are joining us has just texted in a question.
I mean, any film that we make is for the largest possible audience. I'm not making a film for a Jewish audience specifically. I'm not making a film for, a specific niche. The film was commissioned by Crave, which is part of Bell Media on that end of it. And currently we are in negotiations for an international release of the film in the US on either a network or a streamer like an Amazon or a Netflix. But that's our plan with the film.
You have talked often, and if you have other questions, please let us know, and we'll you can get them to us via chat, and I'll pass them along to Barry. You have talked a great deal about secrets of success, and one of the phrases in your book that I really resonated with me was know your limitations. And I mean, we all shoot for as high as we can. And certainly your workload would suggest that you're always looking, at the future and not really looking behind particularly. But that makes me wonder, what exactly do you mean by limitations? Know your limitations. What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, that means I'm just, you want to take certain risks without a doubt. But at the same time, I tend to, by that, I mean, I tend to surround myself with people that are better than me. Areas that I'm just not going to be an expert in. I'm working on a big music documentary right now, again, and it's of the jazz genre, of which I love, but there's a certain language and aptitude that I'm just not going to know, and so I know my limitations, and I'm not going to profess to be an expert. So I'm surrounding myself with experts, in that field. And it's the same thing in anything. I don't profess to know everything about everything, but make sure that you always hire or surround yourself with people that are smarter and be open to that insight, especially in filmmaking. Yesterday, I sat down with a piano legend and watched him choose between one or two different pianos for the shoot we've got coming up. And he sat at this 1966 Steinway, and he said that, he found it too bright. And had too much action. I didn't know what that meant. He ended up deferring to a 1916 Steinway. Unbelievable, where he found it a little bit more muted. I wouldn't have known the difference. And so you learn, you're constantly learning. I think that's what kept people like Chris Plummer and Ben Ferenz at 101, as he's going to be in a few weeks, young, because you stay curious. You're interested in technology. You're not afraid of saying, I don't know, from Zoom. I don't want to do that. I don't need an iPhone. If my grandchildren want to call me, they'll call me. Wrong. You have to stay curious and interested.
I would suggest that it's curiosity, but also passion that drives your projects, because one of the things that I find is a through line throughout all of them, they don't necessarily follow a straight line in terms of subject matter. They do in the Mogul series, perhaps, but after that, you start to hop around. You look at the art world, you look at lots of different facets of life. And that's curiosity for sure. But it's also, I think, passion for the process of learning. It's passion for the subject, and it's passion for storytelling, which is something I think that must have been embedded in you very young.
It's curiosity, Richard. I mean, the beautiful thing about a documentary versus a feature film is that you control it, right? I'm not beholden to other producers or to actors or to writers. I get very good feedback from the networks that are commissioning the projects or distributors. And for the most part, their feedback's really good on that end of it. And that's exciting. But at the end of the day, it's my story to tell. I generally let the audience make up their mind about, whether this person's a villain or not, if that's the kind of film that I'm doing. But I walk down the street coming up with new documentary ideas constantly, and people are constantly pitching me. Most of the ideas are not great because they're very personal ideas. And which I always say to these people, who besides you is going to be interested in the story of your Aunt Mulca? And that becomes a bit of an issue on that end of it. But I try to find film topics, and God, you've interviewed me for 30 years on that end of it. I try to find topics that are a blending of, commercial and interesting, which made me, a bit of an unaccepted person in the film industry in Canada. And I'm kind of okay with that because, I'm just not going to make that, complicated project for 14 years that finally gets made. I'm interested in making films that are commercial and interesting, but I'm not going down certain roads if I'm not interested myself.
Well, I always wonder, and someone here has written in, and the answer is yes. I will answer for Barry. Do you produce and direct your projects? And so, producing and directing are two different skill sets. You have to have half your brain that is working on the business end, half your brain working on the artistic side. How do you find a balance between those two? Do you think stronger in one aspect or the other, or does one come a little bit more easily to you? How does it work between the split?
Well, there's no question I prefer the directing and the creative process more than the business side of things. But, as an independent producer, you're responsible for raising the funds, pitching the projects on that end of it. I never really make a film unless I've raised the money. I don't want to sort of work on a pipe dream of a project. So, and the good thing is, for me, I just said this to somebody today pitching a project. I'm just as happy with no as I am yes. I just don't want to be left in the middle of this purgatory. I remember the great David Brown, who produced The Sting and Jaws, said to me, he said, don't be in such a rush to get to Hollywood. And I said, why not? And he said, it's the only town in the world where you can die of encouragement.
The legendary saying, you never have a bad meeting. You walk out of every meeting saying, this is fantastic, I'm going to get the gig. And then crickets. I would
do meetings in LA. I'd call my mother in Montreal and I go, Mom, you would not believe it. I just came from William Morris. Like that meant anything. She probably thought it was a tailor. Right. And I think they're going to do this. And then of course, nothing would happen. Nothing on that end of it. So, the producing side, I think in one occasion, I made a documentary on David Steinberg, comedian come sitcom director. And I did not produce it. I was the director, and I would never do that again because I just didn't have the control of the final product.
Right. A question from one of our viewers here. Who is there out there that you would love to work with but haven't yet? And I'd even throw a living or dead in there just to open up the question a bit.
The problem with dead is that you just can't get a meeting. That's the issue.
It's harder. Yeah.
On that end of it. Wow, it's a great question. I mean, it's Ralph Lauren was somebody that I really wanted to make a documentary about. It ended up happening. I saw it. I didn't love it because it was, it was rather sycophantic. Not that I was going to make some sort of expose because there's really nothing terrible to say about Ralph Lauren, but I just loved his sense of family and his sense of defining a certain design aesthetic and a class, an American class that I loved about him. And that did not happen. Got close, but didn't happen. Tom Ford in the fashion world. I haven't done the great fashion documentary. I remember seeing the Valentino documentary at TIFF done by Matt Tynauer, Vanity Fair writer. And that to me was sort of a definitive, fashion doc. And given the fact that my father was in the industry, I'd still like to do that. But, Tom Ford's one I'm going to certainly, I had a conversation with him last year on a different topic. And I know his sense is that he doesn't feel like he's really accomplished any of that status yet, which is crazy because he's a triple threat on that end of it. In terms of other people, there are people, political figures that that I'll never get a chance to meet because they're gone that I would have liked to really do definitive documentaries. I mean, Churchill was one of them, but I ended up doing a documentary called An Unlikely Obsession with Sir Martin Gilbert, who is Churchill's official biographer. And it was about Churchill's almost obsessive relationship with trying to preserve Jews and create a state of Israel. And there's a lot of people who will say that, he was, that there was a double-edged sword with him, but Churchill was certainly one of them. You can't really think of great, political leaders, Mandela, that are still with us, that, or even if they're the ones that are living, that you really want to devote a year to your life making a film about. I mean, when Trump started to go off the rails, I got a lot of phone calls about that, but it didn't, it's easy to say it now because I think we can all agree, whether you're supportive or not, it's enough. But it wasn't anything that I really wanted to devote my time doing.
Well, what's more interesting to you, because some of the names that you have mentioned here and some of the people that you've actually profiled in your films have been on the way up. Many have been on the way down or have experienced, as we started off talking in the Monsters and Moguls, these Shakespearean tumbles. What's more interesting for you as a filmmaker, the tumble or the happy ending?
Such a great question. Never been asked that before. I think, Richard, without copping out, I think it's anybody that fills a frame that is just, great storytelling. It can't just be me behind the camera figuring out a way to, to edit and weave it together. You've got to be able to tell a great story. I don't know if we have the time, but, I made a documentary years ago called Glitter Palace about the motion picture country home in Los Angeles where people in Hollywood go to retire. And I was trying to find work for Brian Linehan, and he came out, and we were supposed to interview this fantastic, legendary cinematographer who did all of Hitchcock's work. And when we got to LA, he died. And the Motion Picture Country Home said, look, would you mind interviewing his wife, Myrna? And I went, okay. She's had a hard time. The husband died. It'd be great. So I told Brian Linehan this. He goes, are you kidding? I'm not interviewing Myrna. We're supposed to be interviewing her. So I said, look, you're just going to do it. It was so difficult. So we drive up there and they bring Myrna in and her hair is done and she's wearing a mink stole and the makeup's done and wonderful. And Brian has his notes and he's very angry with me. And he goes, so Myrna, I understand that your husband was the cinematographer on Ben-Hur and did Hitchcock's work. What was that like? The stories he must have told when he came home for dinner. She said, he never talked about his work. And Brian looks at me and I said, just a little bit more, one more. So he goes, Myrna, I see you worked at Max Factor. Wow. Unbelievable. The Rita Hayworth coming in, all the George Cukor doing makeup tests for legendary actresses. What was that like? She looks right at him and she says, I worked in payroll. and Brian Linehan went, and that was the end of that.
I love that so much. We've all had those. We've all had those interviews. But it's the grace in which you get out of them, I think, that tells you the whole story. So we're almost out of time here. If there's any other questions from the audience, let me know now because we're down into the last few minutes. I'm thinking back to your book, Moguls, Monsters, and Madmen, and your Uncle Manny, who advised you to stay away from the Canadian movie business. You'll end up making documentaries about the gestation period of the beaver, he warned. Get into advertising. Well, you did both. What do you think Uncle Manny would think now?
I think he'd be very proud. I think he'd be surprised. And he was a dreamer and never really happened for him. But he was smart enough at the age of 9 to show me a Vogue, a September issue of Vogue, and show me 500 ads and say, this is where the money is. And I don't know how he knew that. He was a printer. So, when I came to Toronto, with a dream of being a filmmaker, that was my first job, was to get into advertising. And the first account was the Royal Alex. So how lucky was I to sort of have both and then make short films and then always do both. My late friend Jay Switzer used to always say, how's that pesky day job of yours in the ad agency? But I've always managed to do both and love it.
Yeah, and to weave them together. When you look at the width and breadth of your career, as you say, your first big client was the Royal Alex. You worked with Garth Dobrinsky. All these items or clients that were directly related to show business, which was your primary concern anyway. It was the thing that you loved. If your first client had been a car manufacturer or something, maybe things would have been different.
That's 100%, and that was, my option was to go to an ad agency and work on Ford, and thank God I did not do that on that end of it. But Richard, I mean, when you talk about life lessons, we could talk about celebrities all day long, but I've been lucky to have, I talked about my father and his influence. I've been lucky to have mentors and people in my life that after my father passed away, Dusty Cole, who started the Toronto Film Festival, who was a father without a doubt. Eddie Greenspan, famous criminal attorney, his passing still guts me because he was just such a great, real friend. So, lucky to have those people that I could continue to learn from.
Well, and I love that your ethos is to continue that tradition. Those people were mentors for you and people that provided help and guidance for you all the way along. And now you do the same. You took 2 phone calls today to tell grandkids and nephews about the film business. And those phone calls aren't any fun, but they're important to do.
Happy. I don't know that I have much to give them anymore. Now I seem to learn everything from my daughter, Sloan. But,
well, this is it. This is all our time. Barry, what a pleasure to speak to you.
Richard, love you. Thank you.
I wish we could do this in person. Hopefully soon we'll be able to sit in the same room and kibitz again.
A kibbutz. Kibbutz is a place where you go in Israel as a kibbutz. It's kibbutz. Let me teach you. Kibbutz. There you go.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'm turning you back to Bonnie, there's Bonnie. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Bonnie.
Sorry.
I'm turning things back over to Bonnie.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everybody. And I'm sure you've had as much fun as I've had. It's been a fabulous evening. So entertaining and informative. And I'd really just like to say thank you so much, Richard. And I was remiss not to tell the people that you have actually authored 10 books on pop culture history.
Great ones.
And sorry about that. Also, we look forward to seeing you on TV, on CTV, and of course on 1010.
Well, thank you very much. And I always appreciate anyone that tunes in.
You were a great interviewer. You asked fabulous questions. And Barry, Avrich, is that the right way?
Close enough, Bonnie.
Could you please say it?
Avrich.
Avrich. Okay.
Yes.
You know how to talk about your work, unlike that lady up there in Beverly Hills. And we wanted to hear all about it because honestly, you are our national treasure. And we're very proud of you. And we look forward to seeing these new full production movies that are in the works. It's not easy in COVID time, in this challenging time, doing all this work. So thank you so much. It was a fabulous evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
A few more thanks. I have a few more thanks to the Joe Traeger, our man of the day, who organizes all these fabulous programs for us, and the Adath Israel staff. Also, this program will be on our website in a few days. Next Wednesday, March the 3rd, we have coming back Jonathan Tobin, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, and he'll be discussing the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship under the new President Joe Biden and other current topics. So thank you, stay safe, be healthy, and see you next time. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.